We have the worst business climate in the country. We have amongst the highest taxes. We're number one at income tax, number one at sales tax. And to have that large an economy, that high taxes, and not be able to produce outcomes, that's an embarrassment, especially the Democratic Party.
Founder and managing partner at the Wesley Group and a former Tesla board member.
Steve Wesley.
How do you come at this beast to stomp down some of this stuff so that we can actually create market rate housing? How do we start fixing our problems?
You have to fix your public schools to continue to be a world-class economy.
Steve Wesley, welcome to State of Gold.
Glad to be here. It's exciting.
Thank you for having us. You know, California, on the wrong track by all accounts. So many crises: housing crisis, affordability crisis, education crisis. How did we get here in this beautiful state, Steve?
Well, first, there's a lot of moaning and groaning about the state of California. I want to level set. If you talk to any, forget state, any president or prime minister in the world, they would give their eye teeth to be California. So let's pause for a minute. We're in a time where innovation, entrepreneurship, technology is the dominant economic sector in the world, and California owns it. Let me give an example. California just passed Japan to be the world's fourth largest economy. Who doesn't want that? Let me give another example. Germany, the world's fifth largest economy, 83 million people. We have 39 million. They're twice our size, and we have a higher GDP. That means the average Californian is twice as productive as the most efficient Western European economy. Mm-hmm. What's not to like? Well, there's a lot not to like. Despite our wealth, despite our innovation, despite our ability to be a magnet for the best and brightest people around the planet, we're not providing services well. We have become spoiled and lazy, if you will. Our K through 12 education system, our scores show us as 39th in reading, 43rd in math. Unacceptable. That's governmental malpractice. We need to fix our schools. Homelessness, a national disgrace, and we know why. It's not because of the warm weather. It's not because we have more people with alcohol or drug addiction issues here. There's a lot more of that in West Virginia. But we have worse homelessness. Why? We have not kept our promise to the people of the state to build enough housing for our citizens.
Affordability.
And third, we have the worst business climate in the country. We have amongst the highest taxes. We're number one at income tax, number one at sales tax. And to have that large an economy, that high taxes, and not be able to produce outcomes, that's an embarrassment, especially the Democratic Party, which has been running things. And I say that as a guy who used to be the vice chair of the state Democratic Party.
A big-time Democrat.
There's a lot to answer for. We can fix it. I'm eager to talk about how.
I really appreciate how you opened with the context, the broader context of any other country would love to be California. I completely agree. Then on the street level, for regular people, they can't afford to live where they work. They can't afford their rent. Median price house is above $900,000. The recent study that came out that there's no top-level tradesperson that can live in any county that touches the water. I mean, we have this tale of two worlds. How do we start fixing our problems, Steve? Where would you start?
So, look, everything to me starts with public education. You have to fix your public schools to continue to be a world-class economy. We're not doing that. Now, I've helped build a group called the 21st Century Alliance that focuses on fixing these issues. Let me give you one example. To fix your public schools, you need to get everybody reading by the third grade level. If kids aren't reading by the end of third grade, they are not going to do well in chemistry, algebra, and all the things that are coming down the pipeline, and people are unable to read, start falling behind quicker. Mm-hmm. The best way to do that is to use a specific method. It's called the science of reading. In the old days, it was called phonics. And we've seen state after state, Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, follow this. Let me just give an example. Mississippi, the 49th poorest state in the country, said, we're a disgrace. We're embarrassed. The way to fix this is to get business, schools, unions, everybody together, look at the data and figure out how do we best teach education. Everybody said it is using the science of reading They did that. It didn't happen overnight. It took 5 to 7 years, and they've blown by California, the 49th poorest state in the country with the absolute rock bottom scores. They're now 21st. We're 39th. I'm pleased to say the Assembly just passed the Blanco-Rubio bill to ensure that the teachers in the state of California are now trained to teach the science of learning. The governor's put money in the budget for it. It'll now go before the Senate. But you can't sit on the sidelines and complain. You need to say, what's going wrong? Put partisanship aside and say, what has been proven as you look around the country and the world to say, what's the best practice and to do it. That's what we're trying to do with the 21st Century Alliance. That's what California needs more of. Get beyond the partisanship to fix stuff.
I mean, you've done a great job there with 21st Century Alliance, no doubt. I want to pull an analogy from the past.
Yeah.
We had Gloria Romero on recently on the podcast, and, educator, very passionate on the subject of education, very passionate, I should say. She was the author of the Trigger Law many moons ago that was supposed to empower families who weren't getting a good education in their local school to take the money and shop around. The CTA found ways to really get around that, to essentially annul it before it could actually be enacted. How do you prevent the same thing from happening with modern day phonics?
So that is just what we're working to fix. And look, people bemoan CTA and they're angry with them. I've got a daughter who teaches third grade in public schools in California. CTA's got one job, and that is not, as people think, to look out after best outcomes for our school children. It's to look out to get wages increased for the teachers. So they're doing what they tell people they're going to do. The problem is not so much CTA, it's getting voters to pay attention. It is getting other groups to all weigh in and to create a constituency for best practices. That's what we're doing. What's happened before is people just sit back and complain and say, oh, the problem is the teachers union and the prison guards. It's a lot more sophisticated than that. You don't fix things in a democracy without rolling up the sleeves and doing some work. That's how we got the Rubio bill passed. That's how we're getting other bills passed that I'm happy to talk about. But I was just with Governor Schwarzenegger in Vienna, and I was speaking at the Austrian World Summit along with Tony Blair and the governor and the chancellor of Austria. And Arnold just stood up and said, everybody's complaining about Trump and he's removing incentives for clean energy. He said, stop whining. Change happens at the city and the state level. Don't complain. Get out of your chairs. Help your mayor. Help your governor. We did things in California, and I helped the governor, and I crossed party lines. We can come back to that to do it. To pass bipartisan legislation that got climate reform passed. We can do the same thing in education, but it takes organizing, and it takes organizing across party lines. And there's not enough talk about that these days.
Let's talk about another subject that's a huge passion for yours, money, the budget, the fiscal crisis in California. Here we are again in a budget cycle with some trickery. Looks like from the outside in, we have a $12 billion deficit. If you were taking Newsom aside, what would your advice to him be right now on the budget?
So I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat. We're right on social issues. We're right on the environment. We're right on women's issues and so many other things. When it comes to budgets, we need some help. And at the end of the day, most everybody in this state manages their expenses like I do. You want to make sure more money's coming in than is going out, and you can pay for the stuff you buy. State legislature has not learned that lesson yet. And the Democrats are at fault. We control all three branches of government. There is no one else to look to the left or right, complain. Democrats need to step up to the plate, do a better job of managing the budget, and make sure they spend money on things where you get the biggest return on investment and spend less on the other stuff. Now you might say, Steve, that's pretty controversial. I'm going to call you out. Where do you get the biggest bang on the buck? I'll tell you. Get the biggest bang on the buck by investing in infrastructure. We need to be building more mass transit, more freeways. We need to be building more housing, more dams, both above ground and underground, to deal with our water crisis. We need to be building more. Democrats have to get real about saying no occasionally to the environmental groups, to the building trades, to the consumer attorneys. It is hard to say no to these core constituencies of the Democratic Party. It's hard.
Mhm.
But being a leader requires you to say no to your own constituents and your own party from time to time. If you're not prepared to do that, you're never going to fix things. You're never going to provide the progress you can. At the end of the day, I believe the Democratic Party's ultimate commitment is to the children and parents of the state, not to the union. They should have a seat at the table, but our commitment needs to be to the children first, other entities second.
Well, amen to that. Let's get specific for a sec. Where would you cut? So there's the 12 billion that is a number being thrown around now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's been verified. You're about to do a special on this by the independent legislative analyst. But where would you take the hacksaw? And I want to throw one other thing out before you answer. We've added upwards of 50,000 W-2s in Newsom's tenure since he came in 2019. It's a huge bloat. What are they all doing? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But where would you cut?
So everybody, when they run for office, talks about, I'm going to shower money on education, and I'm going to shower money on this and that. No one wants to talk about where to cut. The state government's too big. We've expanded it way ahead of the rate of inflation. This has not been one of Newsom's strongest areas by any independent account. There are specific areas. Let me cite one. The prisons of the state, the prison population's gone down by between a quarter and a third over the last decade. There ought to be a similar reduction in costs and in spending on the prisons. In fact, they continue to go up when the services they're providing to the number of prisoners has gone down. That's unacceptable. Let me give you another example. People often say, well, of course, California doesn't come in the top in public school results. You have a lot of English as a second language learners. I get it. I'm married to a Chinese immigrant. That's absolutely right. So does Texas, and so does Florida. And those states are both providing dramatically better educational outcomes with a lower investment per student. So it's not enough to just say, oh, which budgets do you cut? Although I think we can cut the prison budget. It's about where can you get efficiency? Where can you have higher standards? We are getting amongst the lowest bang for the buck for education. Education spending continues to go up on a per student basis, way ahead of inflation, and our outcomes are slowly flattened down. That's not acceptable. Every Californian needs to be aware of the numbers, because only when you have the data can you fix it.
Accountability is a word that doesn't come up a lot. Well, it comes up a lot in terms of a criticism of California government, but there's not a lot of accountability and transparency in terms of how the money is being spent and therefore what the outcomes are that justify the investment.
Let me tell you what doesn't work, and then I'll tell you what works. Because I've run for office, and what happens is every candidate who's there and every critic and every news reporter is saying, is there waste, fraud, and abuse, and where is it? And what they desperately want to hear is that if you just get to page 839 of the budget, there it is. It's 20 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse, and we're just going to, it's that missing page. That page does not exist. There are 100 things you need to do. The punchline is you have to measure it against known standards around the state. You need to come back and say, how the hell did I do it, and how can we do better? Let me just give you one example. When COVID came, there's a State Department, this Department of EDD, that provides welfare insurance and insurance, not just to people who lose their jobs, but to small businesses. The state of California is estimated by the independent auditor at the time, Elaine Howell, to have sent between $20 and $30 billion to fraudsters, over $1 billion of whom are currently sitting incarcerated in California prisons. And we weren't able to get that money back.
Shocking.
It's shocking. Now, let me give you a data point. State of Texas gave $1.375 billion to fraudsters. Well, that's terrible too, but it's hard to get that number down to zero. There's always going to be some people who game the system, but they're coming in at roughly 5% of where we are.
Right.
The minute that number is known, there needs to be a full-on investigation. What are we doing wrong? Why is EDD not doing better? Someone needs to be flying there behind out to Texas and say, what did you do right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're losing, and this is money that just went out the door. It's not about do we raise taxes or cut schools for our children. It is, it's about spending money wisely. There are key metrics that just as if you're running a business, or you're the coach of a football team, I coach 14 teams for my kid, there's certain numbers you want. You know, what do your running backs do the 40-yard line in? And if they're all doing over 6 seconds, you're not going to win a lot of games. You got to fix that. But you got to know the numbers before.
Sure.
You need to know what percent of your students are able to read by the end of 3rd grade or 4th grade in the state of California. Right now, we're in the bottom decile. We got to fix that. That is unacceptable. I don't know if we have to be in the top decile. I happen to think we should when you got the biggest economy. Seems to me like you ought to be at the top, but you ought to be in one of the top 2 deciles.
Mm-hmm.
Housing. The average home built in California costs 80% more than the rest of the state. If you talk to the major home builders in the state of California, everyone will tell you, I live in Beverly Hills. I live in Newport Beach. I want to build housing. I don't want to fly out to Oklahoma or Tennessee or Idaho where most of the housing is being built. But California laws make it impossible for me to build. And we need to build a minimum of 300,000 homes a year just to keep up with demand. If we don't, housing continues to be stratospherically high, which relates directly to the amount of homelessness in the state.
Absolutely.
We need to get serious about CEQA reform, dealing with prevailing wage issues so we can build housing that normal people, including our teachers, firefighters, and police, can afford.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. I want to take a quick time out and urge our listeners and viewers to subscribe to our channels if you don't want to miss another great interview like this one with Steve Wesley. Steve, let's talk more about housing. You could argue that, like education, housing is one of those foundations for families, for kids to be successful in economically, to be successful in life, right? It's the major source of wealth for most U.S. families. And as we said at the top, most California families cannot afford a median price house. I think the stat I've seen most recently is only 16% of families afford a median price home. So it's a huge problem. And there's an elephant in the room called CEQA. There's the trial lawyer complex we've got going on. There's a huge state bureaucracy of people in the keyboard economy, as Jennifer Hernandez calls them, who are just waiting to regulate and monitor and sue. How do you come at this beast to stomp down some of this stuff so that we can actually create market rate housing?
So this is a great question. It is the question of the day. And again, everybody's looking for some silver bullet, simple answer that's going to fix it all. It's just like, I'd like my kid to be as good as Michael Jordan. Well, it's going to require a lot of work. Here's how you get there. First, CEQA, enacted, the California Environmental Quality Act, enacted in 1970. Ronald Reagan, a Republican, put it in place because there was a lot of sprawl in California. They were probably building a few too many houses too quickly, and they wanted to slow it down a little bit, have public approvals. Conceptually, I don't have a problem with that. I supported it at the time. I was in high school, but it made sense. The problem is it's being weaponized by the left and the right. A lot of people on the left say we have to have it. They were recently trying to build a Planned Parenthood clinic in Oakland, and the evangelical right was using CEQA to prevent that. This had nothing to do with the environment whatsoever. It's been hijacked. The combination of litigation issues, all the mold issues, the other things you could sue to slow things down, the environmental issues, it makes it harder to build here than any other state in the country. We need to look at it and have some common sense CEQA reform. Here's where the story gets interesting. We just passed 2011, 2 years ago, in the California Assembly, and the woman who led the charge was an assemblywoman named Buffy Wicks from arguably one of the poorest districts in the state. It has Oakland, Richmond, and a little bit of Berkeley. And now you've got someone on the uber left saying, we got to fix CEQA. And all of the other people on the left are saying, oh my God, that's like part of the Bible. You can't touch that. And she just said, I know it's going to upset some people. I'm just too goddamn tired of seeing so many of my constituents sleeping on the sidewalk. So I'm sorry, some things are going to have to give. That is what you call leadership, the ability to say no to some of your most cherished constituents. When people like that do that, the California 21st Century Alliance steps in, we get their back, we understand which constituencies are going to be upset at them, but we're looking for the best practices, the common good. But people have to pay attention if we're going to fix our state. I'm all in. There's another group of people who says, we're just going to move out. And you can do that, but I at least feel, I went to California public schools. I grew up here. I think I owe something back. I'm not going to go to Florida or Texas. I'd be bored to death. I want to be here because it's the most vibrant state in the world. This is the state everybody looks to see the future. This is the state I want to live in, but it's not going to get better unless you roll up your sleeves and help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you, Steve. I mean, I've stayed here. I've got 5 kids growing up in California, as you know.
You seem to
From
be having
5
all the
months
time.
old to 20 years old. So yeah, I'm committed. I'm in deep. And sometimes I joke with my wife, if we didn't have 5 kids, would we have left? And when I really think about it, the answer is no. This is the greatest state in the country, and this is the place we want to be and be a part of the solution.
And you're only halfway done, right? You've got another 5 coming?
No.
No?
I've not heeded Elon's call to go for 10 or 14. No, 5 is it.
Someone has to get California's population.
Well, that's true. That's true. Let's talk about 2026, which is coming soon.
Yeah.
Sooner than we know. We have all the constitutional officers up for grabs, statewide elections in California. Right now, statewide, we have 11 Democrats and 1 Republican, if you count the 1 Republican on the Board of Equalization. So running statewide and winning is not a Republican thing in the recent past. What do you foresee for 2026? And what will it really take in terms of leadership change to change the state for the better? Because we are locked in a Democratic run cycle and machine. Public sector unions calling the shots, raising and giving the money. What has to change the state?
So I think there is a rebound, a rebalancing happening as we speak right now. And most of my life, California has been a solid blue state. We control the statewide offices, 2/3 control, not just control, 2/3 control in the Assembly and the State Senate. But it wasn't that long ago when you had a series of Republican governors with Reagan, Duke Majan, Wilson. This is not one guy, Schwarzenegger. We've had 5 in the last 40 years. We're a little more purple than people realize. And if the Democratic Party swings too far to the left, and people clearly feel it has, that's why you're seeing the pushback already in the major cities like San Francisco, San Jose, where you're getting strong, thoughtful, I would say, data-driven candidates like Matt Mahan in San Jose, who's terrific, Dan Lurie in San Francisco. These are people who are not political ideologues. They're people who are about fixing things first. I think we're seeing a swing back to the center. Now, does that mean more Republicans are going to get elected to statewide office? I'll tell you the answer to that. If they stand up and say, I am for Donald Trump forever, they're not going to win. If they stand up and say it's time for a new Republican Party that is really focused on fixing our schools, building more housing, and by the way, being pro-environment and supporting gay and women's rights, they're probably going to win. But they've got to get back to where Ronald Reagan was, and as long as they're on the Trump boat, they won't be going anywhere in this state unless something dramatic happens that I'm not seeing.
So that's the primary challenge.
That's the primary challenge.
Primary challenge.
I was with a great young and up-and-coming Republican from this area who all of my friends said was going to be a great candidate for controller, and I think he was thoughtful and qualified. But I asked him, who did you vote as a Republican? Who'd you vote for governor? And he said, I'm not sure. Did you vote? And he said, well, yeah. Well, who'd you vote for? I can't talk about it. And I just said, you're not going to win this race. He lost by 18 points. The Republicans in this state need to figure out whether they're going to be a party in the middle focused on best practices or whether they're going to be an anti-immigrant party floating on the Trump bandwagon, because I don't think that sells to the voters in this state. They want bipartisan problem solvers.
Got it. Who do you like?
So far, I'm still waiting for someone who I think has the backbone and courage to stand up to the party's interests. We'll see who that person is. There's 11 running. I think it's tough to run, and no one wants to stand up to the traditional interest. As you know, I ran for governor in 2006, and it was a very interesting election because I was actually running ahead of Governor Schwarzenegger by 12 points, according to the LA Times. But I didn't quite win the Democratic primary. We just installed something called the open primary. And in retrospect, I think Democratic candidates in the future, if someone comes, runs again more on solving problems, everybody knows there's a housing problem. Everybody knows our public schools can be improved. The business climate can be improved. We could spend our money more wisely, and speaks to moderate decline to state voters. I think you're going to start seeing a different sort of candidate. I hope someone emerges.
Okay, got it. I'm hearing Caruso in my ear.
We'll see.
But he's not going to change parties again, is he? Is that really?
Well, the point for Rick is I think he's a great business leader. He's a great civil servant. He's done a lot right. He's a strong executive. Then he started out as a Republican. He's given a bunch of money to Trump and endorsed Trump, then said he was, I think, independent. Now he's a Democrat. It's hard when people have changed the party more than once or twice. And again, in this state, if you're a Reagan supporter, people get that. If you're a Trump supporter, that's a tough one in California. So we'll see how it shakes out. Who knows? You may see some new names in the ring.
It's going to be exciting. Never a dull moment in California.
Never a dull moment. One thing I promise, everybody in the world is watching California. We are creating the future and creating it here.
All right, Steve, let's finish with some rapid fire.
You got it.
Okay. You're king for a day. What do you do to fix California?
I focus hugely on public education. This is what separates us from everyone else. Our universities are the idol of the rest of the world. The UC system, Stanford, Caltech, etc. We need to make our K through 12 schools work as well. This starts with more accountability for teachers. It starts for higher wages. Those two things go together. You can't just pay them more. It has to be more accountability, higher standards, trigger higher wages. And things like teaching the science of learning, getting fully behind that, huge, huge difference. That's where it all begins.
Which California leader do you respect, past or present?
So that's a tough one. The two that come to mind right off the bat are completely politically different, but I respect Governor Schwarzenegger because he stood up to his party on environmental issues, and he said, I may be a traditional Republican, I was elected as a Republican, but I'm going to make this state the environmental leader of the country and the world. And he did, and that took courage and leadership. At the same time, I give this woman, Buffy Wicks, who's not exactly a household name, but to run in one of the most liberal, progressive leaning districts in the state and to stand up and say, we need CEQA reform if we're ever going to solve homelessness. Both those people showed huge backbone and courage. They are both heroes in my book.
They're good ones. What do outsiders get wrong about California?
I think a lot of outsiders who are in the Fox-Trump bubble are thinking there's rampant crime all over. And in fact, our crime numbers are better than most of the rest of the country. They think that there is, rampant, wild progressivism and chaos here. In fact, our economy is the fourth largest in the world, the most efficient, but most importantly, we're leading in virtually every major area, from artificial intelligence to the next generation of biotech. Our economy is leading the planet. And if you do that, the only question remaining is, are you going to spend all that money you have wisely? And we've already solved the tough part of the equation. Everybody wants to be us. They're just looking at how we spend the money and saying, you can do a lot better, folks. Let's elect the officials that'll make it happen.
Mm-hmm. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope are the next generation of leaders, people like Matt Mahan, the new guy coming into the city of San Jose. He's followed Sam Liccardo's lead. He is absolutely focused on reducing crime, creating jobs, building more housing. That's the sort of can-do candidate, happens to be a Democrat, but he is going to go far. I think Dan Lurie, the same thing. Managing San Francisco's it's a tough place. There's a lot of political constituencies there that he's got to manage, different minority groups, different crime issues, the heavy labor. He's got his hands full, but so far he's off to a strong start. But there's a whole new group of leaders that I think are stepping away from the traditional Democratic mantra, and I think that'll serve them well. Everybody's looking for a new set of issues in the Democratic Party. This book, Abundance, has, I think, led a renaissance of thinking about how we deal with our own special interests a little more effectively.
Okay. Well said. Last one. California is, fill in the blank.
California is the envy of the rest of the world because we are creating the future here. We now just need to figure out how to better take the extraordinary tax base we have and investing wisely in the future, just like Pat Brown and governors did before us. They paid down huge dividends and investment to the next generation. We need to do that for our kids and grandkids.
Pat
I
Brown.
think we're up to the task.
That's a good pull. You could throw Wilson in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Steve, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
We appreciate your time.
Likewise.
And insights.
That's for doing this. The more people focused on California and how to fix it instead of leaving it, the better off we'll all be.
That's right. Come back now.
Come back now.
Come back now.